This morning, we're taking a look at identity, race, and perception. And we're doing it through a stunning new collection of essays by Matthew R. Morris. In Black Boys Like Me, Morris is exploring his own personal experiences and what it was like growing up as a young Black man in Ontario. And Matthew Morris is joining us this morning to share. Good morning. Welcome to your morning studio. Glad to have you here.
Thank you for having me.
It is not easy to unpack the nuances of what we're going to discuss in the 5 minutes that we have together, but we're going to do our best to try. And we're going to start with the writing process. What was that like for you, sorting out which essays to include?
So I kind of had an idea going into writing this book, what I wanted to cover. I wanted to cover institutions and tropes and big topics in our culture. So for instance, I knew that I wanted to have an essay on sports and how sports intersects with race and racism. I also wanted to have an essay on school and how education kind of impedes in certain ways and filters in certain ways Black males and Black masculinity in terms of how they're able to exist. So for me, the writing process was kind of, I already had the idea of what I wanted to write about, mainly based on my experiences growing up in Scarborough, Ontario, in Toronto, and then being a Canadian who ended up going to the US on a football scholarship. So there were main topics that I knew that I wanted to cover because those topics were important in the conversation around race and racism and belonging.
Matthew, who's the book for?
The book is for people who are interested in furthering their understanding about how we can be more inclusive as a culture and more inclusive as a society. I like to think that, I know that when it comes to these hard topics to discuss, we cannot just talk about it from one perspective, right? So for us to have and engage in a conversation around Blackness and Black identity, we need to have a conversation that involves everybody at the table, whether you're Black, whether you're white. If we're having a conversation around masculinity, we need to have people that are females or from all different sexual orientations to engage in these conversations. In terms of, the book's subtitle is Confrontations with Race, Identity, and Belonging. So if we want to transcend race and transcend identity and break down and dismantle some of these stereotypes, we need to invite everyone to the conversation.
And one of those conversations is about the education system. And you've lived on both sides, both as a student and now as a teacher. So shout out to Ontario Tech and Brock University, where you teach.
Yes.
The high school experience for you was pivotal. There was friction between academic achievement and your Black identity. Can you share more about that?
Yeah, I think that, certainly still exists today. But when I went to high school, not to date myself, but in the late 90s, early 2000s, there was an undercurrent of, I guess, an ethos of how Black males were kind of allowed to exist. In my book, there's a chapter called The Fresh Prince Syndrome, where, we all we're familiar with that show, The Fresh Prince, right? And Will Smith, if we reflect on his character, he was allowed to exist in certain ways, right? He was very immersed in hip-hop, pop culture. He displayed being the class clown. His attitude was very nonchalant towards schooling. And that type of character, that type of identity was synonymous with Blackness and Black males, especially Black males who lived in urban settings. So reflecting, as a teacher in my role in education now, one of my goals with this book is to continue the conversation around the continuum of how Blackness exists and how Black males are allowed to exist in our culture. And secondly, to shatter some of those stereotypes of what Blackness means, right? Just because I have tattoos and I dress to a particular aesthetic, that doesn't tell you everything about who I am as a person, right? We're allowed to exist on a multitude of platforms, and that's what I hope that this book brings.
And you get to that very successfully in the book. It is called Black Boys Like Me, a fantastic read. Matthew, thanks for coming on today. We're gonna let you get back to your classes.
Yeah, thank you for having me. Appreciate it.
Hey, thanks for watching. If you liked this, be sure to subscribe here, or you can check out more Your Morning videos right here.